Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. My name is Octoman. Sorry. My name is Octoman, and today I'm talking a bit about a scriptable object. What is their use case, and what can you make or what can you use that scriptable objects for? So, in the first place, I want to talk about what is a scriptable object. A scriptable object is basically nothing else than a data holder, like an asset, which is just keeping data for you together in one particular spot. What we can make use of that is we can always request whatever is stored in this data holder in this scriptable object, and we can make use of it. For example, we can do some mathematical calculations by just taking one scriptable object and the other. Then we're going to take the numbers or whatever is going to be inside of that scriptable objects, and we can calculate them together, for example. So that's just an easy one. So what we also can do is, since we probably don't want to define scriptable objects like the whole day, we want to simplify a lot of things. I want to show you how you can create scriptable objects, of course, as well as what the use cases of these things are. So let's get straight into coding. What I want to do at first is I want to create a folder, a scripts folder in here, so we have enough space and we are not, crowding too much into the scripts area. So in the two scripts, I want to create a new C# script, and I call this one, what do I call it? I don't know. Probably I'm gonna name it item. So this scriptable objects can be used, for example, for quest systems, item systems, for stores, for whatever, wherever you need like static, unchangeable things. Like you can even create characters from that scriptable object and so on and so forth. There are hundreds of possibilities which you are able to make use of. We're going to start rather simple, so I show you how you can create that and how you, of course, can access these items, for example, depending on whatever the type is or whatever. There's, once again, 100 possibilities to do all of that. So I open my item now in MonoDevelop. You can also use Visual Studio if you like to. I get rid of Start and Update. And since scriptable objects have their own, let's say, functionality, but still can inherit mono behavior, we're going to get rid of mono behavior in this case, but we define it as a scriptable object. So our item here, whatever item it is, currently it doesn't do anything, is going to be inherit a scriptable object, so we can derive from the scriptable object class and the game objects and all the other stuff. So what we can now do is we can, for example, say, okay, we're gonna put in data, just plain data. You can put in sprites, images, you can put in game objects, prefabs, you can do vectors, arrays, enums, lists. You can put in like every content you need for your objects, for your items later on inside these scriptable objects, and you can call them from wherever you like, as long as you have the connection to the scriptable object anywhere. Okay, so what we can do for now is we, for example, just create a float with something like maybe health. It absolutely does not matter where you're currently at. We just start from the very beginning. The good thing about scriptable object is we can create 100 different items just from that by using the Unity editor. And how we can do that is we need to create some kind of asset menu where we can pick from. And how do we do that? We at first start here with that square brackets. What we can type in is create asset menu. So we can create our own asset menu, like from a drop-down list and so on. We can even put in folders and subfolders of different types, for example, and we can define them. So in create asset menu, we need to define, for example, a file name. So how do we name that thing? We can name it item, we can name it data, we can name it whatever we like, but we have to type it in. So we say, for example, file name. So also you can always read the description of or the summary of that particular items or item types, or in this case, the file name string, which is saying file is a default file name for use for newly created instances of this scriptable object. So we say file name, and what we can do, for example, is we say equal to, we can name it now data or maybe just new item. Once again, it's up to you how you want to do that. I'm going to show you where this is going to show up anyways later on. Then we say comma. Since we also want to have a menu name is going to, as you can also see, is displaying and showing in the type of the assets and create menu, meaning it is going to show up in the right click menu when you are inside the project or assets folder, as well as it's going to go upwards inside the upper area where the game create or game objects are going to be created. So what we're going to do here is we create a menu name, and we can equal that to whatever we like to. For example, we can give it, for example, the directory inventory or accessor inventory. And then we can also be way more specific. For example, just droppable items or useful items or any kind of item. And let's just name it item or items in this case. So now we are able to create new items by using the create asset menu accessor over here to create new scriptable objects of type of the class item. Let me save that and show you what's going on with that. So once again, this is still a scriptable object, nothing fancy at all. Don't forget to save, by the way, whenever you are writing stuff down. And I let the compiler run pretty quick, so he's not telling me, oh no, there's not stuff working or whatever. And what we now see is when we go to, I believe it's asset, create, in here we get this inventory part and the items part. And from here we can now create a new item. And it will be automatically created over here in the assets menu or in the assets project file. For example, we can also right click here, create inventory items. When we do that, it tells us we want to create a new item. As you can see, new item, that's the file name we have implemented beforehand. What we now can do with that, we can just give it a name. For example, potion. It can be anything. I just want to show you the way at first how the things are going to be created and how they probably work. What we can now do with that potion item, we can give it any specific health because once again, this is the float, a public float, which we have created beforehand. So for example, we type in 10. If that potion will give us later on 10 health, for example, we are absolutely able to do that and make use of this particular number. So, and this will be always stored as an asset. As you can see down below here, it's potion.asset. So we can always make use of this potion asset at any time and wherever we have a connection to it. How do we do that? Gonna show you that how we can access that. For example, I create a new C# script. For example, my let's say it's an inventory or something. It's super simple. We just go through the basic at first. So what I can now do is I can inside inventory itself, which is going to be laid on a system which does not touch the potion itself, but it can store it. Like it can be a specific type or can hold a specific type of or inside an array of these scriptable objects. For example, I believe so. We can create a list or an array of type item. And we can also declare it. At first, we can name it inventory list or something. And we can say equal to. So we initialize that already as list item. Open close parentheses, close the line with a semicolon, and don't forget to save. I need to make this one public. Probably it's not directly working, but if not working, then we're gonna do and go into this. And I want to add the item or the inventory somewhere, like an empty game object, for example. If I drag that here, I'm going to have an inventory list on the right side. What I can do with that, I can now take this potion and drag this into the inventory list, meaning we now have access from or into this list to read how much this potion, for example, gives us. And we can even go a step further and say how many of the potions do we have, but we need to store all of that, of course, later on into the inventory list. Once again, I'm not going to create an inventory system right now. I just want to show you how these scriptable objects come together and how they're working at all. If you don't want to have a potion or an inventory system, you can also take this and make a use of it for character creation, for example. So what we're going to do is, instead of creating a new item, we can also create a new C# script, which is also inheriting a scriptable object. But for example, we can name it character, let's say. And when we open this one up in Mono Develop or Visual Studio, then we are able to, of course, put in any data we probably later on want to have for this specific character. Once again, you can create classes for that. It's absolutely fine, works is basically the same way, but you can now make sure that you have all this data already set up. And what we can do is we can define now something like a string name or character name, whatever. And we can say for now it's an empty string, but we can fill in all this data later on directly inside the inspector. What else can we do with that? Of course, we can give it something like we can give it items, we can give it an equipment, we can give it an enum. Once again, we can put in anything we like. For example, of what type is this character from. For example, it's a long range, a short range. It's going to be of any range, whoever knows. So, and all of that can be stored in the scriptable object. Once again, a scriptable object is nothing else than a data container, which we can make use of and take the information from and where we want to take from. So also we can give it, once again, a connection to prefabs, for example. So we can say instantiate the character or the prefab which is stored inside the scriptable object based on its character. Let's do that and try that out. So I want to create, of course, these need to be public, otherwise we probably, well, it doesn't make sense to have them private, so we want to make them public. Public, a game object, let's say prefab. And maybe we can also give it several other things. And we can, once again, even here, we can give it a connection to what is the current stuff this character has with it. And we can connect other scriptable objects with it. For example, we give it a public item array. So we don't necessarily need to use a list. But lists, once again, are dynamic. So inventory systems should always be of dynamic type. So arrays usually don't be the best solution for that, and say the just item list or whatever, or just inventory or whatever you please and like. So we can even do that. So we can prepare a base of a character with even different stats. Like we can give it all these stats can also be used or created in each or different scriptable object as well. So just a float, just an integer, just whatever, an element. And we can once again switch back and forth and create all these different placeholders for all these scriptable objects. And this is part of all of that. So we can also define them directly inside this particular character. For example, we can give it some attributes, public, int, whatever attribute we need. Once again, we can connect health to it. We can give it something like his stamina. Then we can say public int wisdom, and maybe one more, maybe some strengths. I don't know. Wisdom and a public int strengths. And since we, typos, strengths. And what we also want to do is, of course, we want to implement this into our asset menu. So once again, we create our asset menu, open close parentheses, and in here at first we give it a name, file name. This is just a new name, so maybe new character, because we want to create a new character in this case. Then we have also the menu asset, or the menu name in this case, is equal to, and then we can say, okay, we probably want to put this also into the inventory tabs, and we are absolutely able to do so, even if it is not important at the moment. But we can say characters or character. So we can put this also in the same part or in the same menu name of type inventory, but we just have another part like here, like for all the characters, for example. You don't do that probably because, well, you want to have everything as organized as possible. Okay, when we are done with that, we can create a new inventory. Well, we let the compiler run first until it's done. Then we're gonna go to inventory, and as you can see now we have here characters. So we can create a new character. For example, I call him Merlin, whatever name. So I can also give the character name over here. I can now design every character. Even enemies can be designed the same way. It's like, okay, his name is going to be Merlin. Then we're gonna probably create a prefab. We can give it an item list, and we can drop in any item, like the potion we have created over the scriptable object. And we can give it some stamina, like 5, wisdom, or he's super wisdomized, 15, and he's super weak in strength. So, and that way we're gonna create super simple, super fast characters where we can later on inherit from, or actually, yeah, get infos from, basically. So what we now can do is we can create a prefab for Merlin, and on start, for example, we can create this Merlin character, pass over the scriptable object as a base, or on the data of the base, and then we update it wherever you need to, or we take this into consideration based on, for example, what's the current level of that object. And that's what you can do. Like, for example, let me do that maybe here in the inventory. Or, yeah, I'm gonna take the inventory. So, for example, when we go here to start, this is just a mono develop or mono behavior start function method, which I deleted beforehand. So what we can do is we can, for example, say we want to have a connection to a character. So public. Then now we go to character. So this is going to be this one, and it's just it. So, and we give it a name, maybe our hero, whatever. What we can now do is in inventory, which is sitting on the game object I created beforehand, I can drag in any character I like to, like here, our hero, and as long as Merlin is of type script character or scriptable object character, I can put it into that list or just into that placeholder. Well, I should. There we go. So now I have Merlin as a character, which I have set it up before inside that little placeholder with all its information inside of it. Now we can basically instantiate the prefab if we have one and do all of the magic directly from that particular game object or from this scriptable object, which has all its basic informations. Now we just need to put that infos into the character directly. So for that, we probably want to create a new script which is taking care of the handling of all these informations, like what is the basics, what are the basic informations, or we keep the connection to that. And for example, the stamina, wisdom, and strengths, as which are the most important ones, I guess, for the character itself, are probably just stored somewhere, or we're gonna keep the connection to that particular Merlin object, put it into the prefab, because otherwise we might lose the connection and let the prefab handle all the other things later on. Let's create a 3D object, a cube, and this is going to be my Merlin character. I call him just character because it can be any character basically. I can zero this guy out. We don't do anything with that character at the moment. I can lift it up and put it to wherever I like to. And of course, when I have a prefab folder, which I currently don't have, I can drag my character inside. Let's do that. So I create a new folder, name it prefabs. Maybe you want to later on put in your characters in as special folder or stuff. And then we can actually instantiate this character based on the inventory system, which is going to store the character data inside the scriptable object. So what we're going to have here, is now the connection in Merlin. We can give it that prefab. So we go to prefabs, put the character directly inside the prefabs folder or in the prefab connector basically over here. And then in the game object inventory, we are able to perform everything. So what we need to do is to finalize that step. We can now say we want to instantiate our character or basically the prefab, which is stored inside our hero. Like, for example, we can say instantiate. And now we want to call what do we want to instantiate, and what we need to request is in our hero, there's going to be somewhere the prefab, this one, which is stored once again inside the scriptable object. And when we want to, basically we can just instantiate it because we don't have anything else except this. And maybe if we have another script running or yeah, sitting onto our prefab, we can now fill in all the data from the scriptable object inside this, yeah, prefab. And we can name it and we can tint it whatever we please and like. I'm gonna create another script for that, so I can pass the data wherever I need it. So new C# script, and I maybe call this, I don't know, base character or something. I know it's a bit back and forth and up and down and whatever, you know, but in the long run, you can easily just design how characters are looking or which is created. You can create like huge enemy databases, and you can just randomly pick from a list of enemies which are going to be spawned somewhere, and you just need to connect all the prefabs for that and read back and forth the data on it. So I put the base character onto my character prefab over here. Of course, apply the changes. And now I want to make sure that I open this one up in MonoDevelop. And in here, I just need to create the placeholder or all the infos, which are basically also part of this character. But the most important ones for my character is here, maybe the character name, and as well as stamina, wisdom, and strengths. And probably we can also put in the basic data into the base character. So we can, for example, do stuff like that. So we instantly have the possibility to talk to base character and plant in the new data. How do we do that? At first, whenever we are instantiating that character, we need to have a connection to the character script or the base character script, so we can actually fill in all the data. Well, how do we do that? Of course, we need a connection to it as a game object, and we name it new hero is equal to instantiate prefab la la la. Probably we need to say as game object, so we need to typecast this one as game object. And what we now can do is we can say new hero dot, and now we need to get the component of type base character, which is sitting on our prefab later on, well, hopefully, if we don't forget to add it, open close parentheses, and then we can talk to like everything, every single stuff we have written in there, like stamina, strength, and so on. But to make our life a bit simpler, we only store that into a base character script, I would say, or like a temporary one, a temporary base character. Gonna name it maybe char. No, char is wrong or bad. Charek. Maybe like that. And what we now can say is charek dot. Oh, it doesn't let me. Charek dot, and now what we can talk is to stamina is equal to, and now we place or paste all the information from our hero.stamina. So now we can actually fill all the data into the fields like as a base, and how we start actually the game, for example, with the same data. And we can do that for wisdom. We can do this for strengths as well. So wisdom over here, wisdom over there, wisdom, and here wisdom as well. And so we can also put in the name, so we can literally rename the new hero game object if we like to as well. So we can say new hero dot name, which is a game object, is equal to our hero dot character name. Because character name, once again, is Merlin, as we put it in to the scriptable object. And this way, we can now design 100 of different things just around with that scriptable object without touching code anymore. And we can drag in any character at any point we like and should be able to instantiate it and fill in the correct data. So, except it is telling me something like Stamina of an extension base character could be found. Okay, then I forgot to save, I believe. Like here, need to save base character. And then these 3 errors should be gone. There we go. And now when I press play, usually that character, just in case, apply the changes. You can see everything is zeroed out over here. We can also build a constructor for that, but for the moment or for demonstration purposes, I believe that is the best way to go. When I press play now, I should create somewhere a character. As you can see, this is going to be created automatically. Just reading the data, it's renamed to be Merlin, and it contains all the base character stats, which, except strengths, strength seems to be 0. Funny. Maybe I zeroed it out. Nope. Maybe there's a typo somewhere. Oh, because wisdom. Of course, we need to put in strengths here and strengths there. There we go. And now you can see it's simplifying our process, because whatever we now want to do, for example, oh no, I don't want to play with Merlin, I want to play with, I don't know, Jenny. Then you can say, okay, I want to create a new character, which is called Jenny, and give her, of course, a Jenny name with maybe not 3 ends, but 2. And then we can create another prefab, or in this particular case, I can take even the same prefab because it is independent. And I put this into the prefabs folder as I have done before. I can give it an item, but I don't have to. And I give it maybe a stamina of 20, wisdom of, maybe she's not so clever, and maybe some strengths, or maybe 10, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So now I created a second character in a couple of seconds with a scriptable object without doing all the stuff inside the prefabs, creating new prefabs, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter because I don't have to set up everything in here in the character directly. So I can design and give it like different scriptable objects back and forth to whenever and whatever I like to go with. So once again, when I press play, I get Merlin, but I can also say, okay, I want now to create a Jenny, and that's what I can do as well. So now my hero, which is going to become created, is going to be Jenny. And Jenny has its own stats, and we don't need to necessarily set up everything inside every prefab. We just need to take care of the look of the prefab. And that's pretty much everything you should know about scriptable objects so far. So there are hundreds of possibilities to link in between, get back and forth, as well as do create potions or items. You can give it icons and all the other stuff. And speaking of icons, I have one more thing I want you to show is the assets folder over here. I can create a new folder, which is going to be a special one, by the way. I call it Gizmos. Just make sure it is written completely correct, and I put this happy and sad images into my Gizmos folder. When I rename those icons, first off, I believe I have to bring or make them a sprite 2D. No idea if that is 100% correct. If not, I need to change it or will change it back to default. So I have a happy and a sad icon over here. I believe we don't need to put them as sprites, but we will see. So what we can do is, based on or for these scriptable objects, I can create several different items. Like when you are looking for potions and you probably have problems in finding them, and you want to change this particular icon of Jenny or Merlin to be a happy face, and maybe a potion should be a sad face, then you can absolutely do that by just talking with that gizmo button icons. Basically, we can just rename them. And let's see if it lets me. So what I can now take here is this happy face. By the way, it can be any icon. It can be a character. Then I call icon, and it's going to be of type PNG. Usually what should happen when I go now back to the scripts folder, everybody who is of type character is going to have this little gizmo over here. Same for the other one, which is of type, like, let's say the set icon over here. I want to rename this one to be of type item. So first the type the item, then have a space, and in the very end, you need to tell it is going to be an icon and make sure it is of type PNG. And every icon, every item now, right now, in my prefabs, no, in my gizmos, no, where is it? In my scripts folder, every type icon has now a set face. So this is what you also probably later on want to make use of whenever you're changing or whenever you're creating the basics for all your scriptable objects parts. That's the last thing I wanted to show you. So based on icons, you can literally any class. It's not just related to scriptable objects, but also to scripts and everything else where you want to have your own icons for. You can make use of the gizmos folder in this particular case. So once again, you can use or make use of scriptable objects for a lot of other things as well. Most of the time as a data storage holder or just a holder for one particular stat, like of type float or int or whatever, and call it stat. And then you can make a list or an array of particular or different stats which are coming in or even not. And then you can calculate them like defense minus whatever plus attack and so on and so forth. So all of that should help you in the future to design, or let's say you're gonna be faster in designing things around your character bases or inventory systems. Even quests can be created the same way. The only thing you need to make sure of that you are not updating the base scriptable objects in runtime, because otherwise everything inside these scriptable objects will be overwritten. But when a potion is one day 10 and another day 20 or 30, it's not a good idea. So make sure you don't overwrite the scriptable objects directly. Just pass in the data from the scriptable object into the prefab or whatever you please and like. By the way, you can even, just as an extra note over here, to even visualize or change meshes or whatever inside our base character, for example, you can also tint that particular character, just so you know. For example, you can define a color inside character. So if you want a Jenny to be red, you can absolutely do this as well. Once again, you can connect everything into the scriptable objects, and you can always add to it and change them without touching any code like the base character itself. You just update everything and you're good to go. And once again, the best thing ever is you can create new enemies, put them just into a list of enemies, and then you're good to go. You just drag them wherever you need and like. And that's everything you need to know and need to have later on. What I wanted to show you is of type color or color 32 maybe. I'll just give it a color. And on start, whenever we are here in inventory, I'm gonna create the new item or the new hero over here. I can now tint this new game objects with whatever the color of the single player is going to be. Like, for example, we can say new hero dot, I believe it's the mesh renderer component. Probably I'm wrong, I don't know. Mesh renderer. Inside should be a material, open close parentheses, don't forget that. There should be a material or something. Maybe we need to do shared material, I'm not sure. Dot, and in there is a color, and we can set this color to be our hero color, so our hero dot color. So you can even tint your character based on however you set this one up. Once again, shouldn't be that hard, assuming the color type character could not be found because I believe I forgot to save. There we go. And in Jenny and in Merlin, we have created these characters already, but we can easily go into them and give them any color. For example, I want Jenny to be red. Don't forget to increase alpha to 100%. Same for Merlin. I'm gonna give Merlin maybe a bluish tint. Alpha to 100%. And now whenever I create one of these guys, like in this case Jenny should be red. There we go. Jenny is red because we just added a color field to colorize this object over here. And you can do this with the complete mesh. If you want to have like a red dragon, a green dragon, a blue or whatever, then you just need a white dragon, and you can just easily tint that by, yeah, just use a color. But don't forget, the better they look, the more awesome your game is going to be. To show you, by the way, that Merlin is also going to be correct, I dragged Merlin here into our hero slot. Press play, and Merlin is going to appear blue. And that's everything you should need to know. And now I believe you can assume what else you can do with scriptable objects. You can, once again, create a huge amount of databases or just scriptable objects. You can, combine everything with everything else. And you just need to have somewhere a connection to all of these scriptable objects. Once again, same for inventories. You can just literally add two inventories and always take whatever potion, for example. You can count them up into a list. You just need to create an extra class where you know how many there are inside, and then you can show how many in your inventory are. And you can always take away from that, but you always have a connection to whatever you have in your inventory. Same for armor, weapon. You can create weapons and armor just easily, and you can even put them into the character base here. Like, what is the currently equipped weapon, for example? You can drag in a scriptable object. Okay, it's the sword of something, and I know that, and I can also read the data from the sword. How much damage do I do, and so on and so forth, just by having the connection to these particular weapon slots and all the other stuff. So super simple to set up, super performant, I believe, and you can also, once again, simplify your life in creating huge amount of games by just creating the scriptable objects. So, and that's basically everything, once again, I wanted to cover. I hope you enjoyed this live stream, and if you have already, just thumb it up, of course. And if you see the video later on in the future on my channel, feel free to thumb it up as well. And yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in and watching. I hope you learned a lot. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next tutorial or live stream. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye. Oh, and by the way, you can hire me for your games if you like to. So, meaning you go to octomangames.com, write me or leave me a message over there, and we can actually, work on your game if you like to. Thanks a lot again, and see you soon. Bye-bye.